The research vessel moved slowly through the darkness of space. Dr. G1 stood at the main window and watched the stars. She had spent 15 years studying alien life, but she had never found any intelligent species. Until today. The scanning equipment had detected something unusual near the edge of human territory. It was a station. Not human. Not anything they had seen before. Ji-won felt her heart beating faster. This was the moment every scientist dreamed about. First contact with another intelligent species. Admiral Hyun-woo received the report on Earth. He was an old man now with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 30 years. Most of that time had been peaceful. Humans had spread across 17 colony worlds. They had built cities and farms. They had created a good life among the stars. The military existed mostly to protect against accidents and pirates. Real war was something from the history books. The Admiral read Ji-won's report carefully. An alien station. Advanced technology. No response to communication attempts. He made his decision quickly. Send diplomats. Follow all first contact protocols. Show them that humanity comes in peace. Ambassador Eun-ji prepared for the most important mission of her life. She selected a crew of 347 people, scientists, linguists, artists, and cultural experts. They loaded the diplomatic ship with gifts. Music from every human culture, art from 1,000 years of history, mathematical formulas and scientific data, everything that showed the beauty of human civilization. The ship left Earth on a Tuesday morning. Eun-ji watched her home planet disappear behind them. Her daughter had cried when she said goodbye. Eun-ji had promised to return in 3 months. She would keep that promise. She always kept her promises to her daughter. The diplomatic ship approached the alien station 5 days later. Eun-ji sent greetings in every language and mathematical sequence they could think of. The station remained silent for 6 hours. Then it responded. The response was not words. It was weapons fire. The first shot tore through the diplomatic ship's hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Eun-ji heard screaming on the communication channels. She tried to send a message. A plea for peace, a request to understand what went wrong. The second shot destroyed the bridge. Ambassador Eun-ji died instantly. All 347 humans aboard died within 10 minutes. The aliens broadcast a message across all frequencies. Their language was harsh and clicking, but the translation computers on human ships picked it up. The message was simple and clear. Humanity must surrender all colony worlds. All humans must submit to slavery. Any resistance would result in complete extermination. The aliens called themselves the Valkyrim. They said this was mercy. Captain Taeyang was 28 years old. He commanded the small defense force on New Busan, a colony world with 2.3 million people. Most of them were farmers and their families. New Busan had peaceful green fields and clean rivers. Children played in safe streets. It was a good place to raise a family. Taeyang received the Valkyrim message at 600 hours. He immediately activated all defense systems and sent out evacuation warnings. But it was too late. The Valkyrim ships appeared in orbit 30 minutes later. There were dozens of them. Each one was 3 times larger than any human vessel. The orbital bombardment began at 6:45 hours. Taeyang watched from the command center as fire fell from the sky. The western continent disappeared in flames within the first hour. The city of New Seoul, home to 400,000 people, was gone. Just gone. The eastern farms burned next, then the southern settlements. Taeyang tried to fight back. His defense platforms fired at the Valkyrim ships. They might as well have been throwing rocks at mountains. The Valkyrim shields absorbed everything. They did not even bother to return fire on the defense platforms. They just kept burning the cities. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it stopped, 1.8 million humans were dead. Taeyang's communication board showed nothing but static. Every city was destroyed. Every military base was gone. The only survivors were in scattered emergency shelters deep underground. Then the Valkyrim landed troops. Taeyang watched through the few working cameras. The aliens were tall and covered in scales. They moved through the ruins with weapons ready. They were not there to kill the survivors. They were there to capture them. To make them slaves, Admiral Hyun-woo received the distress calls from New Busan. He was in a meeting when the first reports came in. He watched the video feeds in silence. His staff waited for orders. The Admiral's hands shook slightly as he activated the fleet-wide communication system. The Terran Defense Fleet moved toward New Busan at maximum speed. But space is vast and ships are slow. It took them 18 hours to arrive. 18 hours while the Valkyrie rounded up survivors and loaded them onto slave ships. When the fleet finally reached New Busan, Admiral Hyunwoo saw the devastation. An entire world turned to ash. He ordered all ships to attack the Valkyrie vessels. The battle was brief and brutal. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable, but Valkyrie ships had better shields and weapons. The Admiral lost 12 ships in the first engagement. But the attack gave Captain Taeyang the time he needed. He organized every surviving civilian into transport ships. Men, women, children, anyone who could move got onto those ships. Taeyang personally carried injured people to the loading ramps. He worked until his muscles screamed and his lungs burned. The last transport ship left New Busan with Taeyang aboard. He stood at the window and watched his home burn. He had saved 50,000 people. He had lost 1.8 million. The math was simple and terrible. Admiral Hyunwoo intercepted Valkyrie communications during the battle. The alien commanders were laughing. They were joking about how easy it had been, how weak humans were, how satisfying it would be to break them completely. The Admiral made a decision then, a cold, hard decision that would change everything. He had spent 30 years believing that peace was always possible, that every conflict could be resolved through talking and understanding. The Valkyrie had taught him a different lesson. Some species could not be reasoned with. Some threats could not be negotiated away. The fleet returned to Earth. The survivors from New Busan were taken to hospitals and shelters. Taeyang gave his report to the Admiral in person. He described everything he had seen. The fires, the screaming, the bodies. The Admiral listened without interrupting. The Terran Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all 17 colony worlds gathered. Some called for immediate surrender to save lives. Others demanded revenge. Admiral Hyunwoo presented evidence that his intelligence teams had gathered from Valkyrie data networks. They found records of 17 other species, all extinct, all exterminated by the Valkyrie. The debate lasted 3 days. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not negotiate. Humanity would fight, and humanity would win, whatever it took, however long it took. The Valkyrie had made their choice when they killed Ambassador Yoonji and her crew. They had sealed their fate when they burned New Busan. Admiral Hyunwoo left the council chamber with his orders. Totaiba, no restrictions, no rules of engagement beyond what was necessary to win. He walked to his office alone and sat in the darkness for a long time. Then he began making calls. To scientists, to military commanders, to anyone who could help end this threat. The Valkyrie had wanted to show humanity what happened to species that refused to submit. They had wanted to teach a lesson through terror and violence. They had succeeded. Humanity had learned, but perhaps not the lesson the Valkyrie intended. Humanity had learned that some enemies must be destroyed completely. That mercy shown to the merciless was cruelty to the innocent. That sometimes the only way to protect those you love is to eradicate those who threaten them. The war had begun. The Valkyrie did not know it yet, but they had already lost. They had awakened something in humanity that had slept for centuries. Something primal and unstoppable. They had provoked the wrong species, and they would pay the price. The Valkyrie Empire had ruled space for 8,000 years. They had conquered 43 species. Some they enslaved. Others they simply killed. Their military had never lost a war. Not in 8 millennia. They believed themselves the ultimate power in the galaxy. Warlord Krefthak commanded the Valkyrie Armada. He sat in his command throne and read reports about humanity. The species was young. They had only reached space 300 years ago. Their military had just 200 ships compared to his 5,000. Their colonies were poorly defended. Their technology seemed primitive. Krefthak sent orders for a second attack wave. 10 more human colonies would be enslaved. He expected complete submission within 2 months. Maybe 3 if the humans were stubborn. Then the Valkyrie would have new slaves to work their mines and build their ships. It would be profitable and easy. On Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo was appointed Supreme Commander of all Terran forces. He had total authority to do whatever necessary to win the war. His first action was to activate protocols that humanity had hoped never to use. For 300 years, humans had developed technology for peaceful purposes. Fusion reactors powered cities and ships. Lasers mined asteroids and built structures. Nanomachines terraformed planets and cleaned environments. Medical science had extended human life and cured diseases. All of it had been designed with safety and peace in mind. Admiral Hunwoo gave orders to weaponize everything. Dr. Sung Min was the director of advanced weapons development. He was a thin man with nervous hands who had spent his career developing mining equipment. Now the admiral stood in his laboratory and gave him a new mission: turn every piece of peaceful technology into weapons of war. Sung Min worked day and night. The fusion reactors that powered cities were modified. Now they could be overloaded to create explosions powerful enough to crack planets. The mining lasers that carved through asteroids were enhanced and mounted on ships. They could cut through Valkyrie armor like paper. The terraforming nanomachines received new programming. Instead of building, they would deconstruct. Everything they touched would be broken down to basic atoms. The factories on Earth and the core worlds ran without stopping. New ships were built. New weapons were produced. Everything humanity had learned about engineering and science was turned toward a single goal: victory, complete and total victory. Colonel Da-Yun commanded the Special Operations Division. She was given unlimited resources to create something new. Elite soldiers enhanced with experimental technology that pushed human bodies beyond normal limits. They called it Ghost Corps. The enhancement process was dangerous. 1 in 5 volunteers died during the procedures. But there were thousands of volunteers. People who had lost family on New Busan. People who understood what the Valkyrie would do to humanity if they won. People who were willing to die for a chance to fight back. Captain Taeyang was among the first to volunteer. He still saw New Busan burning every time he closed his eyes. He still heard the screaming. The enhancement process took 3 months and nearly killed him twice. But when it was finished, he was stronger than any normal human. His reflexes were 3 times faster. His mind processed information at incredible speed. He could survive in the vacuum of space for hours without a suit. He could keep fighting with injuries that would kill ordinary people instantly. Colonel Da-Yun trained 2,000 Ghost Corps soldiers. Taeyang was the best of them. She made him a team leader. His team included Minseo, a former engineer who could hack any system, and Bo-Ra, a medical specialist who kept the team alive through impossible situations. While humanity prepared, the Valkyrie's second wave attacked. Warlord Krevthak chose Titan Station as his target. It was a mining colony with 50,000 humans. Light defenses. Should be easy. The Valkyrie fleet arrived expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found humans ready to fight. The battle started at 1400 hours. Human ships moved with precision that surprised the Valkyrie. They were smaller and lighter, but they fought with coordinated tactics that made every shot count. The Valkyrie had one major advantage: numbers. For every human ship, there were 5 Valkyrie vessels. But the humans refused to retreat. When their ships were damaged beyond repair, they did not surrender. They activated self-destruct sequences and rammed into Valkyrie vessels. The explosions took both ships down. Krevthak watched in confusion. This was not how prey species behaved. They were supposed to run. They were supposed to beg for mercy. These humans fought like cornered animals with nothing to lose. The battle lasted 3 days. The Valkyrie won eventually. They had more ships and firepower. Titan Station fell, but Krevthak had lost 73 ships. He had expected to lose perhaps 5. The victory felt wrong. Too expensive, too hard. His intelligence officers analyzed the battle data. The reports were troubling. Human weapons were more advanced than initial scans had suggested. Their tactics were sophisticated. Their crews fought with a level of determination that bordered on insanity. One human captain had continued fighting for 6 hours after his ship lost life support. He suffocated at his post while still firing weapons. Krevthak sent his report back to the Valkyrie High Command. He requested reinforcements. The response came back quickly. Do not request reinforcements for fighting primitives. Complete your mission. Show no weakness. On Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo reviewed the battle recordings from Titan Station. He had lost the colony and 1,200 soldiers. But they had proven something important. The Valkyrie could be hurt. They could be killed. They were not invincible. He called a meeting with his senior commanders. Colonel Da-Eun was there, Dr. Sung Min, Captain Jae-Hwa of the new stealth destroyer fleet. Admiral Hyunwoo laid out his strategy. Humanity would stop fighting defensively. No more waiting for attacks. No more trying to hold territory. From now on, humanity would attack. Captain Jae-Hwa commanded the stealth destroyer Retribution. It was unlike any ship humans had built before. coated in materials that absorbed sensor waves, running on minimal energy output. It could drift through space completely undetected. Its weapons were precise and powerful. HFY received her orders directly from the Admiral. Take the Retribution deep into Valkyrie space. Find high-value targets. Strike without warning. Show them that nowhere is safe. The Retribution left Earth on a cold October morning. The crew of 200 knew they might never return. They went anyway. HFY plotted a course that would take them through 15 Valkyrie systems. They would learn everything about the enemy. Then they would hurt them. Meanwhile, Ghost Corps teams began their missions. Taeyang led his team to a Valkyrie supply depot on the edge of their territory. They infiltrated during a shift change. Mincio hacked their security systems. Bora kept everyone healthy and alert. Taeyang planted charges throughout the facility. The explosion destroyed supplies meant to support 10,000 Valkyrie troops for 6 months. Food, ammunition, equipment all gone. The Ghost Corps team was back on their transport ship before the Valkyrie even knew they had been attacked. More teams followed. They hit logistics networks. They destroyed fuel depots. They sabotaged communications relays. Each mission was small, but together, they began to strain Valkyrie operations. The Valkyrie started to notice. Reports came in from across their territory. Humans were everywhere. How could a species with so few ships be attacking so many places? Where were they coming from? How were they getting past defenses? Warlord Krevthak began to feel something he had not experienced in his long military career. Doubt. These humans were not behaving like any enemy he had fought before. They did not try to hold ground. They did not protect their territory. They just attacked and attacked and attacked. He interrogated captured humans when he could catch them. Most killed themselves before capture. The few who were taken alive refused to talk. One human soldier, wounded and dying, just laughed at him. The soldier said something in human language that the translators rendered as, "You should have left us alone." Then the soldier died. On Earth, the factories worked faster. More weapons, more ships, more enhancements for soldiers. The entire human economy shifted to war production. There were shortages of civilian goods. Rationing became common. But nobody complained. Everyone had lost someone on New Busan or in the battles that followed. Everyone understood what was at stake. Admiral Hyunwoo barely slept. He studied Valkyrie tactics and searched for weaknesses. He read reports from Ghost Corps teams and stealth ships. Slowly a picture formed. The Valkyrie were strong, but they were arrogant. They believed in their superiority so completely that they could not imagine losing. That arrogance would be their downfall. Dr. Sungmin brought the Admiral a new weapon. Something special. The ultimate expression of human technology turned to destruction. The Admiral looked at the specifications and nodded slowly. This would work. This would show the Valkyrie what humanity was truly capable of. Captain HFY's Retribution sent back intelligence from deep in Valkyrie space. She had found their major military staging world, a planet called Krevshar. 800 million Valkyrie lived there. Their largest fleet yards, their main training facilities, everything they needed to wage war across the galaxy. The Admiral made his decision. Krevshar would be the demonstration. The stealth destroyer Retribution drifted through the darkness toward Krevshar. Captain HFY watched the planet grow larger on her screens. 800 million Valkyrie lived down there. Massive fleet yards orbited the planet like steel moons. Thousands of ships came and went every day. This was the heart of Valkyrie military power. HFY thought about Ambassador Yunji and her crew. 347 people who went seeking peace and found only death. She thought about the children burning on New Busan. The Valkyrie had shown what they thought of human life. Now humanity would return the lesson. In the cargo bay of the Retribution sat Dr. Sungmin's ultimate weapon. It looked harmless, just a small container filled with gray dust. But that dust was billions of nanomachines, each one smaller than a blood cell. Each one programmed with a single instruction: replicate and deconstruct. The nanomachines were designed for terraforming. They could break down rock and soil and rearrange the atoms into whatever was needed. Buildings, roads, atmosphere processors. Given enough time, they could turn a dead world into a garden. Dr. Sungmin had changed their programming. Now they would turn a living world into nothing at all. The Retribution reached the upper atmosphere of Krevshar without being detected. HFY gave the order. The cargo bay opened. The container released its contents. Billions of gray nanomachines spread through the air. To anyone watching, it would look like a tiny puff of dust. Nothing important. Nothing dangerous. The nanomachines went to work immediately. Each one found raw material and began building copies of itself. 1 became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. The growth was exponential and unstoppable. Within 6 hours, the nanomachines numbered in the trillions. They spread across Krevshar like an invisible plague. They touched buildings and began dismantling them atom by atom. They landed on ships and started taking them apart. They seeped into the ground and deconstructed everything they found. The Valkyrie noticed something wrong around the 9th hour. Buildings in the capital city started crumbling. Not exploding. Not burning. Just falling apart into powder. Ships in orbit reported hull breaches that could not be explained. The metal simply disappeared. By the 12th hour, panic set in. The Valkyrie authorities ordered immediate evacuation. Ships launched from the surface carrying millions of refugees. But the nanomachines had already spread to the ships during loading. The deconstruction continued in space. Warlord Krevthak received reports from Krevshar in his flagship. At first, he did not believe them. An entire planet falling apart? Impossible. But the video feeds showed the truth. The great cities of Krevshar were dissolving into clouds of dust. The fleet yards were gone. The training facilities had vanished. He sent his best scientists to analyze what was happening. They took samples and studied them. What they found terrified them. Self-replicating machines too small to see, programmed to destroy everything. And worst of all, there was no way to stop them. Every method they tried to kill the nanomachines just provided more material for them to use. 2 weeks after the Retribution deployed its weapon, Krevshar ceased to exist. The planet was still there, but everything on it was gone. Buildings, equipment, bodies, all reduced to component atoms. 800 million Valkyrie were dead. The largest military shipyard in their empire was erased as if it had never been. The Retribution returned to human space. Captain HFY reported directly to Admiral Hyunwoo. She showed him the recordings of Krevshar's destruction. The Admiral watched in silence. When the video ended, he asked her one question. Did she feel guilty about killing 800 million people? HFY thought about it carefully before answering. She said no. The Valkyrie had killed Ambassador Yoonji when she offered peace. They had burned New Busan. They had declared their intention to enslave or exterminate all humanity. This was war. In war, you destroy the enemy's ability to fight. Krevshar was a military target. She had no regrets. The Admiral nodded. He felt the same way. But he knew others would not. The Terran Council was already receiving reports of what happened at Krevshar. Some members were horrified by the scale of death. They called emergency meetings to discuss whether humanity had gone too far. Ambassador Eunji's sister attended one of these meetings. Her name was Hee-jin, and she had been against the war from the beginning. She believed in negotiation and peace. But when the council debated stopping the attacks, she stood up to speak. Hee-jin reminded them of her sister, a woman who dedicated her life to building bridges between different peoples, who went to the Valkyrie with gifts and hope, who died begging them to understand that humans came in peace. She reminded them of New Busan, of Titan Station, of every human who had died because the Valkyrie saw mercy as weakness. She said the Valkyrie had taught humanity a lesson, that some species cannot be reasoned with, that some threats must be ended completely. Her sister had gone seeking peace and found only death. The kindest response to that was ensuring the Valkyrie could never do it to anyone else. The council voted to continue the war. Meanwhile, Ghost Corps operations intensified. Captain Taeyang led raids deep into Valkyrie territory. His targets were not military bases. They were the things that made Valkyrie civilization function. Power generation facilities, water treatment plants, food production centers. On a cold station orbiting a red dwarf star, Taeyang and his team infiltrated a Valkyrie genetic archive. The Valkyrie stored backup samples of their DNA there. Insurance against extinction. Minseo hacked the security while Bora kept watch. Taeyang planted charges throughout the facility. When the charges detonated, 8,000 years of Valkyrie genetic heritage went up in flames. Irreplaceable samples from extinct Valkyrie bloodlines were destroyed. The Valkyrie who learned of the attack felt something close to grief. Taeyang felt nothing except satisfaction at a job completed. Other Ghost Corps teams hit cloning facilities. The Valkyrie used advanced cloning to maintain their population. Destroying these facilities meant their birth rate would plummet. It was a long-term strategy, not about killing the Valkyrie who existed now, but preventing future generations from existing at all. The Valkyrie Empire began to fracture under the pressure. Different warlords blamed each other for the disasters. Some accused Krevthak of incompetence. Others said the High Command had underestimated humanity. Arguments turned into fights. Fights turned into small civil conflicts. Warlord Krevthak tried to maintain order, but even his own officers doubted him now. How could they trust a commander who had lost Krevshar, who could not stop the human attacks, who seemed unable to predict what the enemy would do next? In desperation, Krevthak sent a message to the human fleet. It was broadcast on all channels. A formal request for negotiation. He offered to discuss terms of ceasefire, perhaps even peace. The humans had proven themselves worthy opponents. Surely they could find a way to end this war. The message reached Admiral Hyunwoo on Earth. His staff gathered to hear his response. Some expected him to consider the offer. Negotiation was the civilized approach. Maybe enough damage had been done. Maybe the Valkyrie had learned their lesson. The Admiral's response was brief. Just 4 words transmitted back to Krevthak. You had your chance. The Admiral explained his reasoning to his staff. The Valkyrie had been offered peace when Ambassador Yoonji approached them. They responded with murder. They had been offered terms after New Busan. They responded with demands for humanity's surrender. They had shown their true nature. Negotiating with them now would only give them time to recover and attack again later. This war would end one way, with the complete elimination of the Valkyrie threat. Anything less would be a betrayal of everyone who had died. Of Yoonji and her crew. Of the children on New Busan. Of every human soldier who gave their life fighting. Dr. Seungmin brought the Admiral new weapons. Biological agents designed specifically for Valkyrie physiology. Viruses that attacked their immune systems. Bacteria that disrupted their reproduction. All engineered with precision to affect only the Valkyrie and no other species. The Admiral approved the deployment. Some historians would later call this moment the point where humanity fully committed to genocide. The Admiral called it ensuring victory. The difference between those views would be debated for centuries. Captain HFY took the biological weapons into Valkyrie space. The Retribution visited 12 different worlds. At each one, they released the agents into the atmosphere. The Valkyrie population centers became infection zones. Hospitals overflowed with the sick. Death rates climbed. On the Valkyrie homeworld, a place humanity had not yet attacked, the ruling council met in emergency session. They were the oldest and most powerful Valkyrie alive. They had seen 8,000 years of empire. They had crushed every enemy they ever faced. Now they watched their species dying and could not understand how it happened. One elder proposed retreat. Abandon the current empire and flee to unexplored space. Start over somewhere the humans would not find them. Other elders rejected this immediately. The Valkyrie did not flee. They did not hide. They conquered. That was their nature. That was their destiny. But even as they debated, Ghost Corps teams were infiltrating their homeworld. Captain Taeyang led 5 separate teams to different locations across the planet. The charges detonated simultaneously across the Valkyrie homeworld. Deep underground, fusion explosions ripped through the planetary crust. The force was precisely calculated. Not enough to destroy the planet itself, but enough to trigger every tectonic weakness. The ground began to shake, first in one region, then spreading across the entire world. Earthquakes that measured beyond any scale. Cities that had stood for thousands of years collapsed in seconds. Mountains crumbled. Oceans surged inland in waves hundreds of feet high. Then the volcanoes woke up, hundreds of them. All at once. Lava fountained into the sky. Ash clouds spread across continents. The temperature rose as heat from the planet's core reached the surface. The Valkyrie ran for their ships, desperate to escape. But there were billions of them and only millions of evacuation spaces. The Valkyrie who made it to orbit watched their homeworld die, the planet that had been the center of their empire for 8,000 years, where their civilization began, where their greatest leaders were buried, all of it burning. 12 billion Valkyrie died in 18 hours, most from the earthquakes and volcanoes, others from the heat and toxic gases, some simply from being trampled in the panic. The homeworld that had seemed eternal was reduced to a hell of fire and ash. Warlord Krevthak received the news in his flagship. He could not believe it at first. The homeworld was the most defended planet in Valkyrie space. Thousands of ships protected it. Planetary shields covered every major city. How could humans have penetrated those defenses? His intelligence officers showed him the answer. Ghost Corps. Human special forces had spent 2 months sneaking onto the planet. They had moved through the defenses like shadows, planted their weapons in places where they would do maximum damage, then left without anyone noticing until it was too late. Krevtak finally understood what his species was fighting. These humans did not wage war like civilized species. They did not follow rules. They did not show mercy. They fought with a cold determination that accepted any method and any cost to achieve victory. They were not soldiers. They were exterminators. The surviving Valkyrie fleet scattered across their remaining territory. Different warlords stopped following Central Command. Everyone tried to protect their own worlds and their own people. The empire that had dominated space for millennia broke apart in weeks. On Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo convened the Terran Council for an important decision. The Valkyrie were broken. Their homeworld was destroyed. Their military was in chaos. Their population was dying from biological weapons and nanomachine attacks. This was the moment to decide how the war would end. Some council members argued for accepting surrender now. The Valkyrie could no longer threaten humanity. Continuing the war would just be killing for the sake of killing. Others wanted to push forward, finish what was started, make sure the Valkyrie could never rebuild. A historian named Ji Young presented research to the council. She had studied the records recovered from Valkyrie databases. The records showed that the Valkyrie had surrendered before in their long history. 3 times in 8,000 years they had been defeated and forced to accept peace terms. But every time within a few centuries the Valkyrie had rebuilt. They used the peace to recover their strength. Then they attacked again and crushed the species that had defeated them. It was a pattern. Surrender was not surrender to the Valkyrie. It was just a temporary strategy. Ji Young showed the council records of the 17 extinct species. Most had defeated the Valkyrie in initial conflicts. Most had accepted Valkyrie surrender and peace treaties. All of them were now extinct. The Valkyrie had a cultural practice they called resurgence. Pretend to be defeated. Wait for the enemy to relax, then come back stronger and finish them. The council listened to this information in heavy silence. If it was true, then accepting Valkyrie surrender would just mean a future war. A war that humanity's children or grandchildren would have to fight. A war that might end with Earth burning the way New Busan had burned. Ambassador Hee-jin spoke again. She reminded them that she had opposed this war at the start. She had believed in peace and negotiation. But the evidence was clear. The Valkyrie were not a species that could coexist with others. They were predators who saw all other life as prey. The only way to protect humanity and every other species was to ensure the Valkyrie could never threaten anyone again. She proposed a resolution. The complete eradication of the Valkyrie species. Not as revenge, not as punishment, but as the only logical way to end the threat permanently. The vote was close. Many council members struggled with the moral weight of genocide. But in the end, the resolution passed. Admiral Hyunwoo received his new orders. Hunt down every remaining Valkyrie population. Use any means necessary. Accept no surrender. Take no prisoners. End the species completely. He had hoped it would not come to this, but he would follow his orders. It was his duty, his burden. The systematic hunting began. Human forces spread across former Valkyrie territory. Commander Ha-jun led the siege fleet from world to world. Each Valkyrie planet received the same message. Unconditional surrender. All military leaders would be executed. All weapons would be destroyed. The population would be monitored permanently. Most Valkyrie worlds rejected these terms. They would rather fight than accept permanent occupation. Ha-jun gave them 1 day to reconsider. When they refused again, he deployed Dr. Sungmin's weapons. Nanomachines, biological agents, orbital bombardment. Each world that refused was systematically destroyed. Some Valkyrie populations tried to flee to unexplored space. They loaded everything they could onto ships and ran. Human hunter-killer groups pursued them. Captain Jaehwa's Retribution was one of many ships dedicated to this mission. They tracked Valkyrie refugees through the darkness and destroyed them before they could establish new colonies. Ghost Corps teams continued their work. Captain Tae-yang led missions to find hidden Valkyrie bases, small populations trying to survive in secret. His team had become experts at finding and eliminating these groups. Minesio could hack into any Valkyrie computer system and find their hidden locations. Bora kept the team healthy through long missions in hostile environments. Tae-yang led them from target to target. On a forgotten moon in an unexplored system, Taeyang found a Valkyrie colony of 50,000. They had fled there at the start of the war, built a small settlement. They had children, schools, farms. They were not soldiers, just families trying to survive. Taeyang watched them through his surveillance equipment. He saw Valkyrie children playing in streets, saw parents working to feed their families, saw elderly Valkyrie tending gardens. They looked peaceful, almost innocent. His orders were clear: no survivors, no exceptions. But Taeyang hesitated. These were not the Valkyrie who had burned New Busan. These were not soldiers or warlords. They were just people who happened to be born Valkyrie. He called Admiral Hyunwoo on secure communication, asked for confirmation of his orders. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, older than when the war started. He asked Taeyang what he was seeing. Taeyang described the colony, the families, the children. He asked if these people really needed to die. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. The Admiral said he understood Taeyang's doubt, but he reminded him of why they were here. The Valkyrie had shown what they would do given the chance. These children would grow up. Some would become soldiers. Some would become leaders. And the cycle would start again. Maybe in 50 years, maybe in 200, but it would start. The only way to be certain humanity was safe was to end the Valkyrie completely. All of them, even the ones who seemed innocent. It was a terrible burden, but it was the price of protecting Earth and all human worlds, the price of ensuring what happened to New Busan never happened again. Taeyang understood. He ended the communication and gave orders to his team. They infiltrated the colony during the night, planted charges throughout the settlement, set them to detonate simultaneously. Then they retreated to their ship. The colony was destroyed in seconds. 50,000 Valkyrie gone. No survivors. No witnesses. Just another extinct population in a species being systematically erased from existence. Taeyang stood in his quarters afterward and thought about what he had become. Before the war, he had been a simple defense officer. He protected colonies and helped people. Now he was an executioner of an entire species. He killed not just soldiers but families. Not just the guilty but the innocent. Bora found him there. She asked if he was okay. Taeyang did not answer for a while. Finally, he said he was doing what needed to be done, that someone had to carry this burden, that if it meant his children would never face the Valkyrie, then it was worth it. Bora nodded. She understood. They all did. Across former Valkyrie space, the extermination continued. World after world fell silent. Population after population disappeared. Dr. Sungmin's biological weapons ensured that any Valkyrie who survived could not reproduce. The species was dying, not slowly, not with dignity, but completely and inevitably. Warlord Krevthak gathered the last significant Valkyrie military force, about 200 ships and maybe 1 million soldiers. He knew they could not win, but he would not run. He was Valkyrie. His species had ruled for 8,000 years. They would not end hiding in the darkness like cowards. 2 years had passed since the war began. The Valkyrie Empire was gone. Their worlds were empty or destroyed. Their ships were debris. Their population had dropped from 200 billion to less than 10,000 scattered survivors. The systematic hunt continued. Captain Taeyang had lost count of how many Valkyrie he had killed. Hundreds directly, thousands indirectly through the missions he led. His hands were covered in blood that no amount of washing could remove. He saw their faces when he slept, heard their final screams, but he kept working because the job was not finished. His team tracked a signal to an abandoned asteroid station far from any inhabited system. Intelligence suggested this was one of the last Valkyrie groups. Maybe 500 individuals. The station had been a mining facility once. Now it was a desperate hiding place. Taeyang led his Ghost Corps team through the cold corridors. The station had minimal power. Emergency lighting cast shadows everywhere. They found the Valkyrie in a large chamber near the center. Not soldiers, just survivors. Elderly Valkyrie, females and children, the last remnants of families that had fled the destruction. The Valkyrie saw the humans and knew why they had come. Some of them began praying to gods that had not saved their species. Others simply held their children and waited. One old Valkyrie male stepped forward. He spoke in broken human language. He said they knew what they had done, that his species had started this war through cruelty and arrogance, that the destruction of New Busan was evil and unforgivable, He said he understood humanity's anger, but he begged for mercy for the children. They had never hurt anyone. They were innocent. Taiyang listened to the old Valkyrim. He thought about the children of New Busan. They had been innocent too. The Valkyrim had shown them no mercy, but he still hesitated. These were the last few hundred of an entire species. Killing them would complete the genocide. He contacted Admiral Hyunwoo again. The Admiral appeared on his communicator. Taiyang asked one final time if they had to do this, if there was no other way. The Admiral's answer was firm but not angry. He said that mercy shown to those who showed no mercy was cruelty to their future victims, that the Valkyrim had proven they could not change, that this was the only way to ensure they never hurt anyone again. Taiyang nodded. He understood the logic even if his heart rebelled against it. He ended the communication and looked at his team. Minseo had tears running down her face, but her expression was determined. Bora simply waited for orders. They would follow him whatever he decided. He made the decision. His team sealed the chamber and vented the atmosphere. The Valkyrim died quickly. 500 lives ended, among the last of their kind. Taiyang watched through the window until it was over. Then he turned away and never spoke of it again. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human forces found the last Valkyrim hiding places. One by one, they were eliminated. Dr. Sungmin's biological weapons ensured that any Valkyrim who escaped could not reproduce. The species had no future, only an ending. On Earth, a very old Valkyrim was kept alive in a secure facility. His name was Varmoth, and he had been a leader of their ruling council. He was the last Valkyrim elder who remembered the Empire at its height, who had lived for over 300 years and seen their species conquer dozens of others. Varmoth asked to send one final message to humanity. Admiral Hyunwoo granted the request. The old Valkyrim appeared on screens across human space. He did not beg for mercy. He knew that time had passed. Instead, he asked a question. Why had humanity been different? The Valkyrim had fought 43 other species. Some had fought back hard at first, but all of them eventually broke. They accepted slavery or negotiated peace. They wanted to survive more than they wanted to fight. Why did humans never stop? Why did they fight with such complete dedication? Admiral Hyunwoo responded personally. He said the Valkyrim had made a critical mistake. They had attacked human children. In every human culture across all of history, protecting children was the highest priority. It was the one thing that united all of humanity regardless of differences. By massacring the children of New Busan, the Valkyrim had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He said humanity had tried to offer peace. Ambassador Unji went to them with open hands and hope for friendship. The Valkyrim responded with murder. They declared their intention to enslave or exterminate humanity. They left no room for negotiation or compromise. They made it clear that one species would survive this conflict and one would not. The Admiral said the Valkyrim thought themselves apex predators, but they forgot that humans evolved as persistence hunters. Humans did not give up. They tracked their prey across continents and through years. They did not stop until the hunt was over. The Valkyrim had started a hunt. Now they were learning what it meant to be the prey. Varmoth listened to this explanation. He said he finally understood. The Valkyrim had seen themselves as superior to all other life. But humanity had proven that superiority meant nothing without wisdom. The Valkyrim had the strength to conquer, but not the wisdom to know when not to fight. That failure would be their epitaph. A week later, Varmoth died. Natural causes. Old age finally claiming him. He was the last Valkyrim elder, the last living connection to the Empire's glory days. His death was not mourned by humans. It was simply noted in reports as another step toward complete eradication. Admiral Hyunwoo stood before the Terran Council one final time to report on the war. He was 70 years old now. The war had aged him more than the years alone could account for. His hair was completely white. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was still strong. He reported that the Valkyrim species was functionally extinct. Less than 100 individuals remained, and all were infected with biological agents that prevented reproduction. Those last few would die of old age within 50 years. There would be no next generation. No resurgence, no return. The threat was ended permanently. Some council members asked about the moral cost of genocide, about humanity's soul after deliberately exterminating an intelligent species. The Admiral acknowledged these concerns. He said that every human involved in the war would carry that weight forever. But he maintained that the decision was correct. The Valkyrie had proven through 8,000 years of history that they were an existential threat to all other life. They had exterminated 17 species themselves. They had enslaved dozens more. Given the chance, they would have done the same to humanity. The only way to stop them permanently was complete eradication. Ambassador Heejin spoke as well. She said her sister would have hated what humanity became during this war. Yoonji believed in peace and understanding. She thought every species could learn to coexist. But she had been wrong about the Valkyrie. Some species could not change. Some threats could not be reasoned with. The price of learning that lesson was paid in blood. Human blood first, then Valkyrie. The Council voted to officially end the war. The Terran Defense Fleet would return to peacetime status. The Ghost Corps would be disbanded. The weapon factories would return to producing civilian goods. Humanity would try to return to the peaceful civilization it had been before the Valkyrie attacked. But everyone knew things would never be the same. Humanity had learned what it was capable of when pushed to the edge. The species that reached for the stars with hope and curiosity had become the species that committed genocide to protect itself. That knowledge could not be forgotten. Memorial services were held on New Busan. The planet had been partially terraformed again. Not to the same level as before, but enough to build a memorial site. 2 million names were carved into black stone. Every human who died in the war. From Ambassador Yoonji and her crew to the soldiers who fell in the final battles. Captain Taeyang attended the ceremony. He stood before the memorial and looked at the names. So many people, so many lives cut short. He thought about the Valkyrie he had killed, the soldiers and the civilians, the guilty and the innocent. He wondered if their names deserved a memorial too. But he kept that thought to himself. The memorial had an inscription at its base, simple words that summed up the entire war. They provoked humanity. We ensured they could never do it again. The freed species from Valkyrie territory sent representatives to Earth. 23 different species that had been slaves for generations. They came to thank humanity for liberation. To see the species that had defeated the unstoppable empire, Admiral Hyunwoo met with them in a grand hall. The representatives were nervous. They had learned about what happened to the Valkyrie. Complete extinction. They wondered if humanity was simply a new threat replacing the old one. The Admiral addressed their concerns directly. He said humanity had no interest in conquest or slavery, that the war against the Valkyrie was defensive, that humanity would help the freed species rebuild and protect them if needed. But he also issued a warning. He said humanity had learned a hard lesson, that peace required the ability to wage war, that mercy was only possible from a position of strength. If any species ever attacked humanity or its allies the way the Valkyrie had, they would face the same response. Total and permanent elimination of the threat the freed species understood. Humanity was offering protection and friendship. But that friendship came with a clear message. Do not provoke them. Do not threaten them.